Welcome to Solutions for Higher Education, a podcast by Scott L. Wyatt, president of Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah. To subscribe to this podcast, please visit www.suu.edu/President's Podcast, where you will find both the audio and a written transcript for today's podcast. Hi again, everyone, and welcome to Solutions for Higher Education, a podcast featuring Scott L. Wyatt, the president of Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah. I'm your host, Steve Meredith, and I'm joined in studio today by President Wyatt. Hi, Scott.
Hello, Steve. This is a beautiful day, and this is a fun topic we have.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to this. So for our longtime devoted listeners, I'm talking to you, Mom. No, I'm just kidding. For people that have joined us before, they know that typically at this point, I will ask you to introduce our guest, but I'm going to take the honors today, and that's because I chose the guest. We've chosen as our topic YouTube versus higher education, and just generally a perception that there maybe is a death of expertise, or that. Anyway, that's the topic that we're going to hit around today. And our guest joining us by phone from Salt Lake City is one of my favorite people to talk with and a great friend. His name is Dan Anderegg. Dan?
Hi, it's great to be here.
So you and I haven't actually known each other all that long, probably 3 years, almost 4 years now. And I met you because your name was given to me by somebody that I trusted as I was looking to build a curriculum in music technology here at Southern Utah University. And I contacted you, and you had a very, very impressive resume. And so what I'd like to do first is I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your resume. You're a trained composer. It's not what you do as your day job right now, but tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you. So you're right. I am a trained composer. I actually started getting my bachelor's in piano performance, though. Went to the University of Utah and decided to go into a master's program in film music composing at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, which was really an eye-opening experience for me. I went from a remarkably classical, almost bordering on conservatory-style music education at the University of Utah and jumped straight into what would be maybe considered somewhat heretical by higher education standards at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Very focused on practical application. After that, I went to internship with the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences in LA.
Now that was a big award, right? It was a competitive thing that you got to work with the Emmy folks.
You're right. That's right. It was a competitive thing. I applied. They actually run a internship program for a couple of months that it spans many, many areas of television production. And I happened to just be the one that was awarded the one for music, which was an awesome experience. Really, I can't think of a better on-ramp into television and film music in Los Angeles straight out of school. I was writing music for Danny Lux, who composes for Grey's Anatomy, so he was throwing cues my way to write, and lots of other shows. Many of them aren't as recognizable as Grey's Anatomy, but it was an absolutely wonderfully eye-opening learning experience where I learned the business. I learned the things that you learn in somewhat of an apprentice style on-the-job moment, and that turned into, from the internship, I was hired and worked there for a couple of television seasons. So then we had a little bit of a transition.
Just a small comment. So you as the composer of music in Grey's Anatomy, that means that we've all got some connection with you because we've all heard some of that music.
There you go. Great. We have degrees of relationship of one.
There you go. Yep.
You're right. So it was a great experience. Really, I loved it. I love the craft of it, absolutely. But got to a time where my family and I decided to make a career change, basically for more balance for ourselves. and I was able to get a job with an online education company called pluralsight.com doing some editing work. They're a video-based training company. And I think the interesting thing there is that I started to recognize my desire to not transform, but really add some value into education and some practicality into a lot of the things that as a student myself I wanted to learn. So the timing for Steve and I to meet was fortuitous and perfect, and that led us to working together on this degree and really trying to apply some of our own philosophy to what maybe is really timely and applicable today.
You probably only meet 4 or 5, less than 10 anyway, colleagues in your life with whom you share an obvious philosophical kinship that is so strong that you bond almost immediately. And that was, I won't say that you felt that way about me, crazy guy calling you from Cedar City out of the blue, but I felt that way with you almost immediately because as you say, we had similar backgrounds, lots of classical training, and then we dared commit the heresy of being involved in commercial applications of what we were learning. And I don't share much about my life, but that was actually a big aspect of my late teens all the way through my 40s was being thought of poorly sometimes in some traditional musical fields because I was actually singing on Xena Warrior Princess or on a Disney film or whatever it was that I somehow was was selling my artistry and my creativity and my training short. I always figured that I should make a living as a singer with whoever would pay me. But that's because I'm kind of funny and entrepreneurial that way. Anyway.
Let me butt in there. I absolutely felt the same way. It was as if we were, without even trying, we were understanding each other as we were talking about what we were creating. It was wonderful.
So you and I went through this process of creating a new master's degree in music technology, and that's not the point of this podcast, although I will say, check us out at suu.edu/music technology. Yeah. Anyway, but seriously, search SUU music technology and find our master's degree. But one of the things that you and I did from the very beginning was we had the conversation of what do we want the curriculum to look like and what are the hard questions that people are going to ask us. And one of the questions that we came up with right off the bat that ironically, no one ever did ask us as we were getting the degree approved and so forth, was this. If a student were to present themselves to us and say, why should I pay you graduate tuition for 3 semesters when I could learn everything that you're going to teach me on YouTube in a series of tutorials? We felt like we needed to have a ready answer for that. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today was because of your background with me in that, but also of your background with Pluralsight, and which is a for-pay commercial training organization. And how do we answer those questions in a world where people feel like they are one WebMD visit away from being a doctor or one YouTube tutorial away from being Frank Lloyd Wright or whoever? What extra value does higher education add that you cannot get through a YouTube tutorial?
So I will try and let you speak. I have so many thoughts, but I honestly, when I was contemplating this and contemplating my master's, I realized that yes, I was in a classroom. It was very practical, project-based. We were writing music every single week, and somewhat in a group peer reviewing ourselves and our peers. But I realized, I thought, okay, what about texts? What texts did we use? And I our texts were videos. They were YouTube videos in the classroom, and other videos that were curated by a knowledgeable, experienced professor. And that's part of why I thought maybe my master's was really unique, is that I will admit that there is a wealth of knowledge, whether it's YouTube or a paid for service like Pluralsight or anywhere else. There's so many places online you can find this information. Whether it is paid for or not, there is a wealth of knowledge, and I could learn information. It's just at my fingertips about anything. I mean, I could learn quantum mechanics. Someone has put the information online. But curating it, because there is so much of it, the quality of that needs to be curated by somebody who actually understands the subject. And then beyond that, there's a mentorship element to it that teaches you application. So, I can read, if I want to learn photography, I can read all about lighting and how to use lighting, and then go experiment with it. But who's going to tell me who's right or wrong in an environment that I'm going to learn it in a safe way, unless I go out there and get a bunch of gigs and take people's money and take their pictures and get the lighting really wrong and have a whole bunch of really mad customers. I'm going to learn from that, but it's a lot of painful time.
And you probably are out of business before you get the lesson all the way learned.
Right. Word of mouth. There's no way I'm going to get more clients in that city. Right. So I really feel like the benefit there is curating the right content, finding the content that teaches the right thing without misinformation. There are a lot of people that put stuff online that have learned it themselves or learned it from another YouTube tutorial, and they may just not know a couple of pitfalls because they haven't run into them yet. But a trusted mentor who's curated it and guides you through the process of implementing it into your own art, or maybe you're not doing art, is invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And that is prolonged after you receive your actual degree piece of paper and walk away from school. I'm still in touch with professors who I worked with in higher ed. And like I said, our texts were watching clips of videos on YouTube and discussing them and critiquing them and rescoring them. And I think that's really the value and the difference between just hearing and knowing the information and really, truly implementing that into what I do.
So that's an interesting thing, the idea of the curated list. And as you know, in our program, and I'm sure this is true for faculty across the country, we don't actually see YouTube as an enemy per se. We want to just make sure that we help choose the right videos so that the information is accurate, right?
Right.
And so that we can provide context for why that is. I'll give you a great example from an earlier experience that I had. So in a previous place where I worked, we were asked to create a video mockumentary about our president, who was celebrating 30 years of his presidency at this one college. And President Wyatt's face is going, 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. Nobody should ever be subjected to that. Anyway, I was working with a video editor who was young and very excited. Now, these are back in the early days of Avid Media Composer and Boris, and I'm throwing out things here that are kind of still around, but they were brand new and exciting things. And as I was working with this young person, I said, I need this to be in documentary style. So I want just to have a lower third with the person's name. We're doing man on the street, woman on the street interviews. And it's all supposed to look serious and like a newscast, but it's all very tongue in cheek. So what will help make it funny is if it looks like a newscast and you just bring up this little nameplate with the person's name and what they do, and then it fades back up. So it'll come up and be up for 4 seconds, and then it'll go away. So she went to the video editing suite and came back and was so excited to show me her work, and we saw it, and the letters came cartwheeling in. Literally, they would tumble in because it was some new thing that one of the software programs would do. And I said, no, I don't want to actually really pay too much attention to what this is. It doesn't need to be drawing attention to itself. This is just the name of the person, in documentary style.
Yeah.
And she went back, came back, and it was wrong. Went back, came back, and it was wrong. And it occurred to me after the third time that we were not having the same conversation, because I kept saying documentary style, and she didn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
And so it was one of those moments where learning a tool is a great thing, and it's one of the things that YouTube actually does really well. You can figure out how to start something up, or how to open up a file, or but it doesn't teach you the context of how to apply the tool as well. And in this particular case, this was the tool doing the editing, not the editor using the tool. And and so when I see people who do that, I know almost immediately what their background has been. Their background has been a YouTube tutorial, because they lack the breadth of experience and the breadth of context that's necessary to accurately and effectively use that tool. They've just learned how to switch it on and to make it do a few tricks. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. There's a history behind that tool. It's just as if you were learning music history or another type of applicable history, software development history. There's a history behind even that lower third, even those letters coming in, right? And the theory of applying them is somewhat historically performed, right? It's comical that they cartwheel in, right?
Right.
It belongs on a Kids Incorporated video or Mickey Mouse Club, right?
Right.
And absolutely. Any of these tutorials I look at as possible text, right? And in place of the popular model before, when I was a freshman, I had a teacher who wrote his own textbook, and he sold lots and lots of copies to his students. And I look at them as if they are the text. And so they work in complement with the actual instructor. But the instructor is the one who has to provide framework, like the learning model of how those are applied, what is applied, and when is a appropriate use case to apply those things. You're right. The tools are so powerful today, so much more powerful, that they, given the advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, Facebook has ways to literally edit videos together for you. You just plug in some pictures, or it even searches your photos and creates these little montages for you. Eventually, editing is going to be a function of AI, right?
Yep.
But will that be as good as a person with the historical performance knowledge or historical application knowledge or any of that? I would think not right now.
Yeah. In my case, Zuckerberg finds the foremost random photos that they could possibly find on Facebook and says, "Here, Steve, what? I don't understand that video at all."
I don't remember
Which is
that
why
picture.
I never post. Exactly. Well,
Why am I eating something in every one of these?
That's right. Well, in my particular case, if you could see me, you'd know. Anyway, President, you and I have actually had a podcast on this subject where we've talked about open source texts, and we've talked about really reducing the cost of higher education for students. And so YouTube, as Dan just pointed out, YouTube fills that role very well. There are things that we used to have to create or could only be found in a textbook that are now available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, very often in beautifully produced fashion that tell you as much as a textbook chapter or more, and actually show you how to do something. And in that way, I think YouTube is actually a great improvement over a standard textbook.
Yeah, and I keep thinking that it's been fun to listen to the two of you talk back and forth a little bit about some of these skills, techniques that are important in order to accomplish some task, and then learning some of the background for it in the broader context. Universities are more than simply teaching skills to accomplish certain tasks. And that's one of the things that I've just been thinking about as well, that there's a lot of character development and socialization and mentoring and helping build connections and leading a student from developing that broader content. You know, when I was in law school, we didn't learn one thing about how to be a lawyer.
Yes.
We learned about how to think like a lawyer.
Right.
And then build connections between law school and employers and internships. You know, it's interesting to think of the purpose of all this. That is fun.
So has law school evolved?
Law school's evolved quite a bit.
Yeah.
I did have an internship in law school, but I remember in my first year, somebody asked the property instructor, professor, you know, because he was talking about something from ancient English common law, and somebody said, "What's the current rule in Utah?" And his answer was to look at him quizzically and say, "Why do you care about that?" And as students, we all thought, "Are you serious? That's all we care about. What's the law that applies today?"
Right.
And his answer was, "I don't know why you even care." And it took me years to figure out his point. His point was, the laws change every day.
Right.
The technology changes every day. And unless you have a broad understanding of the principles and concepts and the history of all these things, then you're going to try to learn something and you might learn it, but then you don't know what to do tomorrow when it changes. And so what we were learning to do at law school was we were learning how to think like a lawyer. We were learning how to learn, and we were learning how to research and find things that are challenging to find.
And in our particular case, in the music technology program, we've focused somewhat on that idea of what it means to be a thinking and learning and earning musician. And so we've tried to bridge the gap that exists traditionally between theoretical knowledge and actual hands-on creation. And I think that's another one of those things that YouTube actually does fairly well. You mentioned socialization. One of the things that coming to university does, of course, is now you've all of a sudden got 10,000 friends. But Dan and I teach in an online-only discipline in music technology. And so one of the ways in which we get over that hump of students not being in the same room with the teacher is we have discussion forums and other things. And one of the best ways to create conversation is to have students watch a shared YouTube video where they will, Dan, I think, is actually brilliant at this. He'll find some topic about which there is a documentary film or something. He'll have students watch it, and then he'll curate a discussion about it in his class. Dan, how did you come about that? I mean, you're not a traditionally trained teacher in the sense that you went to an education school and all that. Was that self-learned? Did you think back about what would have been more effective for you?
That is a great question. So, interestingly, I feel like that was the learning model of my master's degree was um, the sources were never just an instructor at the front of the class telling me what they had learned or had come to know. The sources were always a third party, whether it was a documentary or a video or an article or something. It was so much so that I honestly feel like it was a facilitated discussion more than a lecture ever. And everything was done in reaction to something we had watched or listened to or read online, curated by that instructor. So I think that was just the model that I was thinking of how I had learned to find answers online, um, which interestingly President Wyatt, you mentioned that the law changes all the time, right? And you're teaching people to think like lawyers. The major struggle is teaching people to be able to research and solve their own problems once they're gone, when they don't have a professor just to quickly message in Canvas or online or in an email or something. And so oftentimes I find myself in the situation where I am asking students when they have a question, I'm asking them, where have you looked? Before I give them an answer, because they've got to be able to walk away and have confidence that they can leverage the tools to find the most updated information. Which is why sometimes I'm leveraging online resources way more than any text in another form, because the time to market is so short. It's a lot of the times it's more up to date than what I can find inside of a library, right? Like it takes whatever length of time it takes me to record and then upload a video for it to be live for everyone to see. So I think the model that I just kind of found that I learn best in is examining sources and then discussing them with other people. And I was hoping that students find that same model to be the most effective, in so much that I often like to get them stuck. So they have to go research something before they can continue.
I will tell you as Dan's department chair that his classes are exceptionally highly rated as a result of that. I think the students are, I get phone calls sometimes from Dan's students saying, right at the beginning of the semester saying, he's not giving us the answers. Yeah, I know he's not. And I'm not going to either. So I wholeheartely agree. President, not many people know this about you. Maybe you not only are a teacher here at SUU, you teach an honors forum about the Civil War, but you're also a student,
right? Yeah,
and in an online program, right?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's online and face-to-face combination.
Have you found that delivery method that uses this multiple source?
Well, let me back up a step. So several years ago, when I was working at my prior school, I was just looking for somebody to have great conversation with, so I could have a more disciplined effort in reading. I mean, I had things I was very interested in, but I felt like I was missing something. I could read a book, but there wasn't a group of people to sit around and talk about it with. And it's that discussion that really makes it so exciting. And where I have my impressions of what I'm reading, then I get somebody else's, and then kind of an expert who can help us see all this. So I signed up for a master's degree from a private liberal arts school in Ohio, Ashland University, and it's a really neat program because it allows a person to just fly back for a week, spend a week there in intensive study, and then come home and do reading, and then fly back for another week. And I've been doing that for a number of years. And then they modified the program to have some of the classes be online, but they're live. We're all seeing each other. The program is a program that allows us to see every student in small classes. But but I think this idea that I can just grab a book and grab a YouTube tutorial and learn everything I need to learn about American history and government, that was never as successful as sitting down in a group and talking about it.
Yeah.
YouTube versus university. It's just, you can get some skills and specific pieces of information, but you can't weave it all together and fully understand it.
There's you lose the connections to other things, you lose the context, and you lose the depth of understanding. I was sharing with Dan and President Wyatt the fact that I had spent this past weekend assembling a tool chest on wheels in my garage, and that it had been a gift from my wife for Father's Day, and we.
That was last week, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyway, I'm now 2 months behind. Sorry, honey. Anyway, I was struggling a little bit with it, and frankly had followed the directions and had run into a couple of dead ends and couldn't figure out why my picture didn't look like their picture and so forth. And so I jumped online, and here was a funny guy in Tennessee that was putting together the exact same thing and had gone to the trouble to make a video of it. And he was hilarious and kept saying, "Now don't follow the instructions here. You'll run into trouble if you follow the instructions." It was perfect for me. It was ideal. And within 30 minutes, all my problems were fixed, and I had a tool chest on wheels. But I didn't really know how to use the tool chest. I didn't know why I had the tool chest. I didn't really know anything too much about the guy that had taught that to me, or why he had chosen that particular tool chest. And so a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, and a lot of stuff that you deal with every day, Dan, is it's providing context and connection.
Absolutely.
Well, and let me throw in a little side story here. So I visited a mine, pretty sophisticated mining operation, and the question that I asked as we were standing in the maintenance shed is understating this place, this huge maintenance shop for a very successful mining operation. And I said, "What can we help? What can we teach people that are coming to work for you?" And I had my own expectations that the skills,
sure,
right, a whole series of skills. I need to hire people that can do this and do this and do this. And that wasn't even the answer. The answer was, every single person I hire, I want to be a potential manager. It just shocked me. He didn't say a word about welding. He didn't say a word about any of these other sophisticated operations that people needed to do. And it was a high-tech mine. It was a really high-tech mine. GPS buckets.
What?
Three-dimensional coring. This mine, they were able to map the entire reservoir. And so the bucket could be operated by GPS to hit the precise point that maximizes profits. This is super sophisticated. He didn't talk about any of those things. He just said, every person we hire, I want to be a potential manager. So would you please make sure they learn critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills and oral communication skills and written communication skills, all the kinds of things that are really difficult to learn on YouTube. They're the kinds of things that you learn at a university in classes and with mentors.
That's right.
People that can actually read what you're writing and say, let's talk about this for a minute, or that was a great argument that you just made verbally, but let's go back and think of it in different ways. Very personalized kind of thing. The soft skills.
That's absolutely right, actually. And I hear that day in and day out from what in my job at Pluralsight. I'm a curriculum manager right now, and we talk to a lot of enterprise customers who say that exact same thing, whether they're in mining or healthcare or anything else. They have a craving for people that have the soft skills, that they can be emotionally intelligent in how they deal with other people or customers or coworkers or managerial reports. Like, that is definitely a huge part of the discussion that you sought out when you went to that school, President White, is that being able to view issues from another point of view and discuss them intelligently and not in a condescending way. And you're right, that is an absolute skill that is in really high demand.
Well, and yeah, we're seeing this in a lot of places, aren't we, Dan? It's not limited to one industry; it's everywhere. It's so interesting to see how that works. And another skill that employers that I talk to are desperate for are team working skills. Please don't send me somebody that hasn't had multiple experiences working on a project with a team, because once I hire this person, they're going to have to work as a team, and so you don't learn that on YouTube. YouTube is a one person and one computer experience.
That's right.
Employers are looking for a multi-person team who know how to work together and complement each other, be patient with one another because they've done it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Top 10 list of how to be a team player on a YouTube video is not the same as experience working on a project with a team. Absolutely.
And we've all done this in college. The team projects were our most frustrating thing because there was always one person that didn't do any work at all.
That's right.
Right. Right.
But those are the kinds of things we have to learn to be successful in the workplace.
You know, as I've been listening to this, I hearken back to something that I think we've mentioned in a couple of our podcasts, and it's from a book by a man named Jeffrey Selingo, and it's actually what got me thinking about this, and got the president and I talking about this podcast. And Selingo talks about a trip that he made to IBM training. Anyway, long story short, the man that had been in charge of training for new IBM employees, and they spent almost $1 billion a year in getting their employees to think like Big Blue, you know. And he said that they had gone from hiring I-shaped people to hiring T-shaped people. They still wanted people that had great depth of knowledge and understanding, but they couldn't use people who were just the world's best at one thing. They needed people who had that set of soft skills. They had the ability to not only have a really deep knowledge in an area, but also cross-training, knowledge that allowed them to be really important members of a team. And that, again, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. That is a skill that's developed in a university that's not developed in a tutorial.
Well, and sometimes it's so here I hired a chief information officer, the person who ran all of our IT at a college, and he had not gone to college for that subject. But the fact that he went to college, earned a bachelor's degree, earned a doctorate, and along the way had educational experiences and learning led him to be qualified to run an IT department. But it was the bachelor's degree and the doctorate degree that gave him that breadth,
right,
of understanding that he could work with others and solve problems and have the critical thinking. Anyway, it's interesting. A lot of people end up in careers that were not their major in college.
Including all of us right now.
Including all of us. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't major in higher ed administration.
That's right. And I do teach music, but most of my job is not that anymore.
But it goes to speak to the fact that the specific technical skills are very different than the broad understanding that we've been discussing today. They're both important.
They are. Hey, Dan, in your in your day job with Pluralsight, what do you find is the biggest challenge that you have in keeping that balance between practical application and theoretical knowledge? In other words, your primary focus is on in this job is on training for corporate customers. How do you envelop all of those things that they say they want? So yeah, I want them to learn how to use this tool, but I need them to be a team member. I need to. How do you do that in an online situation?
Great question. So Pluralsight, I'm lucky in that they are very open-minded as to what they consider worth teaching, but they also really know who their audience is currently. And so as far as the enterprise customers go, we allow them to really select and decide which courses they might, through the platform, prescribe to their particular employees. Now, the majority of the content is technology based. So it's like software development, IT ops, data professional type stuff. And I find that the hardest thing is the soft skills because they're experiential. We really can nail the information when it comes to coding in this language or setting up this server or whatever it is that you have to do. That we can nail, and we can actually create interactive courses that allow them to do projects, whether it's like coding in the browser or something, and get immediate validation and feedback on whether they've done it right. So they get the practical application of the skill itself. The learning development leaders at the different companies, though, it's really in their hands. The human touch there it's in their hands to do what happens next. If there's a mentorship relationship, that has to happen at the company. So it's not much different, really. There's still the human aspect there that has to give them that guidance and growth and ladder in the company and all of that. We do have content that tries to enumerate soft skills and enlighten people to things they may not have considered before about emotional intelligence or even management skills and things like that. But verifying those, I can't create a project that says, that verifies or validates whether or not someone has empathy. I can test on whether or not they can code in the language. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, this is why, as an analogy, this is why parents and a child are so important. And you can't raise a child by sending them to YouTube to learn the skills.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Solutions for Higher Education, a podcast featuring Scott L. Wyatt, the president of Southern Utah University. We've been joined via telephone today by Dan Anderegg, who's an adjunct here at SUU in music technology and also a curriculum guru for the Pluralsight folks. Visit pluralsight.com if you want to know more about that. President, thank you so much for letting me have Dan join us. I thought that was a very stimulating and interesting discussion.
Agreed.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back again soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Solutions for Higher Education. To subscribe to this podcast, please visit www.suu.edu/President's Podcast, where you will find both the audio and a written transcript of today's podcast. The original music for this podcast was composed by Jack Barton, a master's degree student in music technology at SUU. For more information about Southern Utah University, please visit www.suu.edu.